Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan beat writer for The Free, joined through the screen across the street that-a-way here in Clearfield, Pennsylvania, by our Big Ten insider, Reiner Sabin. We accompanied one another into University Park yesterday, Penn State College, Beaver Stadium, where Michigan beat Penn State 24-15 to go to 10-0. Reiner, it was your second time to State College. We still did have trouble getting in, but we survived.
Yeah, it was the first time. It wasn't quite as happy of a happy experience for Michigan. That was in 2019, my first time there, and they lost in the last minute or so, which basically knocked them out of the Big Ten race. This time, they took care of business in their first big test of the year and have set themselves up for a big showdown with Ohio State in the for all the marbles, and really have kind of put them in position for the national championship run that they're hoping to make.
Yep, that one is, of course, coming up in 2 weeks. We will get to that shortly. But first, of course, we got to talk about just a wild 24 hours. What might go down as one of the crazier 24 hours, certainly the crazier weeks, on the heels of a crazier month in what has been a crazy year. And none of that, I don't think, is hyperbole. It's really been something, how this has all developed. And then on the other side, that's what we'll take a look at in A block. And on the other side of the break, what's next for Michigan and Jim Harbaugh? Busy week off the field, going for win 1,000 in program history on the field. So there will be no rest for the weary going into this week. But Reiner, Michigan is aboard its flight, and this is not a long flight. There's a 45-minute window for Michigan to be in the air. So when they take off from Detroit, and before they've landed in State College, the Big Ten has announced that Jim Harbaugh was found to violate the Big Ten sportsmanship policy, and he is suspended for the following 3 games, for the next 3 games for the rest of the regular season. Michigan was ready for that decision. However, things did not go according to plan after that, right?
No, they basically immediately tried to forestall the punishment by filing for a temporary restraining order, hoping that they would get a judgment on that and basically injunctive relief before kickoff. But the court order ruling was not made in time for Harbaugh to coach the game, and so Sharon Moore was made the acting coach at the very last minute, and it was a wild situation to have to go through and endure right before the biggest test of the year.
Yeah, and the players after the game sort of mapped it out for us, right? Sort of how they all find out. You get this vision of them walking off the plane, them getting the news that Jim Harbaugh is, I think it was right around like 3:30-ish, that he will not get to coach. And then Chris Jenkins apparently is the first one who tweets bet. All the players get together. They're like, oh, should we tweet it? Is it fun? Just that sort of new age social media, right? The new age of college athletics, right? There's always crypto, like crypto messages and rally cries and all these sorts of things. But I mean, I think there is clearly no doubt this has brought Michigan football team closer together. One that was already a very unified group, one that has won consecutive Big Ten championships, has beat Ohio State 2 straight years, had dismantled Penn State last year, and won in Happy Valley the last time it was there in 2021. So, I mean, this was a team that had all the confidence, that has belief, that has done all of these things, right? The things that this team and this program has not done comes when the calendar reads a different month, right? But in November, Michigan has shown it knows how to win, and it did so again yesterday with an old school formula, right? Pounded on the ground, 32 straight runs to end it.
Yeah, it was an interesting strategy that they used, but it was also very effective and kind of a brilliant tactical maneuver for them to counter Manny Diaz's blitz-happy defense, which was getting to J.J. McCarthy early. It seemed like Michigan wanted to pass the ball initially and was going to lean on McCarthy as they have for most of the season. But then they switched gears, went to the running game to basically neutralize Diaz's pass rush and the front seven for Penn State, and it worked brilliantly. I mean, if you don't need to throw the ball and you can effectively move the ball with the running game, why risk it with McCarthy? This was interesting because it was the first game that JJ McCarthy played, first big game JJ McCarthy played since the TCU game. We all know what happened there with a couple of pick sixes. And so, maybe there was some risk-averse strategy there where they wanted to prevent possible turnovers or giveaways, and again, just lean on an offensive line that people had questions about going into the game, but really performed well as a run blocking unit.
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit offline about it before we got going here, and I think we see it sort of overlapping, right? In I think you're totally right that the game plan was to pass, but I don't think it was that Michigan did not trust JJ McCarthy or things was not wanting to turn the ball over that way, so they needed to run. They saw he was under a lot of duress, right? The first two series, he is hit and dropped for a sack on 3rd and 11. On the first series, they have to punt. Then on 3rd and short, Chop Robinson, that was one of the fastest get-offs that at the college level that I've seen. He just blows by Carson Barnhart, and JJ McCarthy's not even to get into like a full 3 or 5 step drop, and he's hit before a receiver can even get open on a short slant on a little hitch route. And so that's when Michigan was like, all right, we need to get the ball out quickly. And even when Michigan was still, quote, throwing the ball, right? Those final 3 passes, screen pass to Samaj Morgan, and then a little dump off to Colston Loveland, all at the line of scrimmage, all or behind the line of scrimmage, right? And so even as it was starting to adjust to that run game formula, it did so with the passing game, and it was just get it out quick. So I think they saw it early, and sure, you could make the case that is a bit of a concern, right? Michigan was supposed to be a pass strong team, and if you can't keep up with an elite pass rush, that's going to be a problem. However, maybe it won't be a problem if you can just revert back to your old formula, and Blake Corum can run 26 times for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Finally, Reiner, that is the Blake Corum that we expected him to look like.
Yeah, it was a very encouraging performance from him. He kept his legs churning and was able to kind of wear down Penn State's defense. Donovan Edwards played his best game of the year, had 2 big 22-yard runs, including one that resulted in a touchdown. Overall, it was a really impressive performance by Michigan's ground attack. It was something that Michigan fans wanted to see, even though they liked the fact that Michigan was passing now. They were still a little bit worried about where the ground attack was, and reasonably so. But again, in the biggest moment of the year, the ground attack came alive and again looked like what we've seen in the last 2 years when Michigan's offensive line won the Joe Moore Award.
Right. And that's what Sharon Moore has preached, this sort of idea, right? It's not every single run is going to hit it big, but if you continue to hammer and hammer, then they will, right? So Blake Corum runs 26 times. 16 of those go for 3 or fewer. That's deemed, as Michigan deems it, an inefficient run, right? On more than half of them. However, you got about 5 of them that went for 4 to 5 yards, and then you got 5 more that went for those longer runs, a run of 7, 9, and then the real backbreakers, a 30 and a 44, right? And so they just say just keep pounding and just keep hammering. Even in between the tackles this time, Michigan had a little success between the tackles running this year, and that obviously changed. Briefly, I want to touch on Donovan Edwards as well. Who did, like you said, had his best game, 10 carries, 52 yards, 2 22-yard rushes. All year, he had run 74 times. 4 of those carries before had gone for 10 yards or more. That's just 5.4% of them, right? So clearly this is a good sign. However, I do want to hesitate and tread tread lightly or cautiously here before we say, oh, Donovan Edwards is back, right? Or he's going to have this is just what's going to happen. He's going to be breaking up all these big runs, because his first 22-yard run, that should have been about a 50-yard touchdown. He had, literally half the field open, and he ran into the back of the line before he then sort of pivoted and finally found that green grass. The second 22-yard run was, that was just a great run, right? However, 6 of his carries went for 2 yards or fewer. 4 went for a loss, right? So he is still getting tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage a lot. So a positive sign. I do have him in my stock watch, like trending up.
But even last year, he was a feast or famine back in a lot of ways. This guy was not a person that necessarily was going to get you 5 yards a pop. He was going to have his 1 and 2 yard, sometimes get caught in the backfield for a loss, and then would pop off a 40 or 50-yard run because he's just that kind of player. So, it wasn't necessarily a surprising kind of fit with, again, his track record. Prior to the season. But again, like you said, you have to be a little bit cautious when it comes to Edwards as far as like whether this is really a breakout performance or not, because again, at the end of the day, he still only gained 52 yards.
Right. And that's why in sort of on the reverse, why I'm certainly wouldn't be panicking about JJ McCarthy or anything like that. Obviously, as you said, a quieter game in the moment when a lot of people were waiting to see had JJ taken that step, right? He's only asked to throw it 8 times. He did run it 8 times as well, but he does not attempt to pass in the final 37 minutes and 41 seconds. Technically, he threw it once, but there was a flag. So the pass did not even go in the stat book. But then again, I am not concerned about McCarthy because Michigan has shown and said all year long, we are going to win by whatever means necessary, however we need to do it, right? And for many weeks, that has meant letting McCarthy shoulder the load or sort of lead the offense. This time, I think they just did not feel a need to. And they saw sort of old school Big Ten football, trestle ball, just shorten the game. Don't make any turnovers. Not that you think JJ is going to throw an interception or are even really that concerned about it, but there is more room for error when you pass it than you run it. And so it's in all aspects of the game, eliminating room for error and making the other team out execute you at 80 yards, 90 yards at a time, which Penn State's offense never looked like it was going to be able to do.
No, again, it was a smart strategy. I don't know what it says about, again, McCarthy. As far as his Heisman odds, when you only throw for 8 passes and or you only throw 8 times in the biggest game of the year so far, and you only have 2 big games really on your schedule, it doesn't do much to appeal to voters based on what he did. Again, though, Michigan is not looking to, or the end goal is not to have J.J. McCarthy win the Heisman, is to win a national championship. And they did what they needed to do and adjusted their strategy accordingly. Again, I think that, had they not, there's a good chance that there would have been maybe a turnover there. There was that pressure that you alluded to with Chop Robinson going around Carson Barnard, led to an incomplete pass that, may have, again, it was an errant throw. It was thrown into traffic. Those are the passes that can get picked off, and you don't want to turn over in this kind of game. Give Penn State any kind of life, to an offense that really, again, like you said, can't really go the distance and is not electric enough to do so.
Right, and I think heading into an Ohio State game, of course, there's Maryland next week, but not much to say there, right? No, Maryland is not going to. I guess trap game, that is a potential trap game, but it does seem everything seems to be setting up for Ohio State. And I think it is in years past, and this is sort of what I wrote for this morning, is that in years past, when you win this way, Michigan winning this way, it would not be all that inspiring because it's pretty much how it would have looked to this point. I think Michigan needed a game like this where it proved that it can control the tempo, move the sticks on the ground, and that Blake Corum and these running backs can run downhill behind their pads, behind their blockers, against a defense. We haven't even mentioned it. That was the number one ranked rushing defense in the country. They were giving up 60 yards per game. So when you take out the kneel downs and the sack adjusted yards, Michigan ran for 4 times that amount, right? And so I think just in years past, people might have wanted to say, like why can't JJ do it or this or that? But I think I think it was a welcome sight.
Yeah, no, I agree. And a person who covers college football from a national perspective said, he was impressed, and he looked at this team as very fundamentally sound with the blocking and tackling. He was super impressed. Compared it to one of LSU's vintage Les Miles' teams from back in the day. I mean, he didn't know if that Michigan quite had the athleticism of those groups, but certainly that those teams won with pure execution and such. And this is a Michigan team that wins that way too. But they do have the added element this year with JJ McCarthy being able to throw the ball. So they've shown that they can win multiple ways. That's the sign of a complete team. Overall, it's a pretty encouraging performance. Again, I mean, as far as it relates to McCarthy's Heisman odds, it's not encouraging at all. But again, that's not the main goal here. The main goal here is to set yourself up for a national championship run, and Michigan did that on Saturday in Happy Valley.
Just to play devil's advocate here and jump in real quick, from a Michigan fan's perspective, sometimes there's fans who are like, oh, greatest team in the world. And then there's other fans who are just, naysayers. We all know the guy who's like never happy with their own team. Just to play devil's advocate here, Michigan came into the season saying they wanted to be 50-50. They wanted to be 50-50. There was a lot of talk about, playing against TCU and playing against Georgia, and they had to be more of a pass-first offense. Do you think this, may be a little bit of a cause for concern of, when you get outside the Big Ten, which is where Michigan's stumbled in the last few years?
That was a good question from Andrew Burkle, our sports editor and producer of this podcast. I'll go first with personally. I don't think it is a concern for me because yes, Michigan said it wants to be 50-50 pass run. That did not mean 50-50 pass run balance every single game, right? It means being every bit as able to pass as you are to run. It means the defense, like Reiner said, having to account for your pass and account for your run. In 3rd and 4, you could run it or you could pass it, right? Like it is just complete balance, and whatever we need to do to win is what we're going to do to win. That is the idea, as I understood it, behind Michigan's 50-50 balance. Jerome Moore sort of said as much post-game yesterday, and this is what that looked like. On this day, it looked like 46 runs and 8 passes. Now, I don't ever foresee that flipping and getting to 46 passes and 8 runs. Obviously, you would certainly be probably very far behind in that game if you were doing that initially. But no, I don't think you have to. It does not have to be 25-25 for you to have a good balanced offense.
I would say it's a slight concern in my opinion, because again, Penn State's defense is good and, athletic enough to create issues and maybe force Michigan to adjust in this way. But, so is potentially the Georgia defense, and maybe, should they encounter like an Alabama or a team like that. Now, I mean, it just depends on the matchups. But if they face a top level defense, it could be a problem where they might not be able to run the ball on them either. But they also will have to throw the ball, and if they can't pass protect, which they didn't look like they were capable of doing very well initially in the Penn State game. That's going to be lights out for Michigan, in that sense. So, I mean, so there is a little bit concern. Like, you can't just go and hope that the running game is going to carry you. You're going to have to pass the ball, and you're going to have to achieve some level of balance within the game to be able to keep these elite teams at bay. So I think there is a little bit of concern. I can see why you asked the question, because I think it's a valid one.
it's true against Penn State. The offense does not pose the threat, right? So
Yes, right.
you don't have in the back of your mind that concern, that race to 30-point, right? Like where we got to capitalize. You can just have the peace of mind of playing field position. However, Penn State has, I would say, a defense that is on par with, or darn near it, with Georgia and Alabama. Just the defensive unit, the athletes, the scheme, all of it. And Michigan found a way to put up enough to beat that system in its way. And so perhaps they can do that again. But you're right. Once Michigan gets out of the Big Ten, that is clearly when this team and this program and this coach needs to prove it.
I would just add that 24 points is really, it's not as much about the running yards and stuff like that. Like 24 points from what we've seen from this Georgia team, who is consistently putting up a bunch of points. Like, you got to get the score. And I think that would maybe be the bigger concern, less so about being able to run. I'm sure they can run the ball, especially when they're bringing in 6, 7 effectively O-line members there to just basically, run at all costs. I just think that as far as a points total, you do have to, factor in that Penn State's offense is not Georgia's offense and stuff like that. Ohio State's offense is better than Penn State's.
Well, and also there's not. I mean, again, you're going against sometimes these, more athlete, defenses that are comparable. Again, you're not going to possibly get behind the chains with the running game, and then you're facing these 3rd and long situations where you're going to have to throw the ball, and you can't just hope that McCarthy can run for 10 or 15 yards on a QB keeper to keep the drive alive, or hand it to Edwards and Corum and put yourselves into a 4th and 1 situation against those teams, because they just might as well stop it too. So it's just there is a risk involved, like you said, with being so dependent on the running game and against these kind of elite teams, and then also conversely having to match touchdown for touchdown potentially with a team like Georgia.
All fair points. And I think the play you're talking about was J.J. McCarthy's 13-yard run on 3rd and 10 that he kept around the right side on the final play of the first quarter. That was the play that really sparked this game, right? I mean, Michigan was still down 3-0 and had not had a first down to that point. After that, Donovan Edwards breaks off his first 22-yard run, and then Samaj Morgan, 19-yard. They go back-to-back screens to Samaj, one on the left, one on the right. The latter on 3rd down, 19 yards, gets into 1st and goal. Corum scores the touchdown, and that really sort of got things going. But I think it's fair to say you would rather McCarthy go 17 of 18 for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns than 7 of 8 for 60. However, this was not, I think today, or on Saturday, I should say, it was not a case of can't, but a case of just no need, just shouldn't, not as wise, not as smart. So I think they live to fight another day, which Reiner, that other day is 2 weeks. Quickly, some initial thoughts about what certainly seems like it is going to be 11-0 Michigan, 11-0 Ohio State, 2 top 3 teams for a spot in the Big Ten title game.
Yeah, I mean, it should be an amazing game and epic showdown, especially with all the subplots related to the sign stealing scandal and how everybody from both sides is reacting to that. So it sets up to be probably the most anticipated game possibly ever in this rivalry, which is pretty hard to believe because there have been some amazing showdowns, 1 versus 2, and even the one last year. Last year. And so it would be amazing in some ways that this would actually be the biggest of them all, but it's setting up to be that way.
We're just going to hold on until then because we need to brace ourselves. It is going to be quite a week, quite a ride. But before that, Michigan's got to get there, and Michigan's got to see if it will have its head coach for that game. It's going to get a lot of answers on Friday. We're going to talk about that and also the future of Michigan and its Big Ten relationship. Both sides really digging in their heels. This could get messy. I think it already has. That's next. This is Hail Yes. All right, we're back. And the question, Reiner, what's next for Michigan? Many of us thought that on Friday when the Big Ten suspended Jim Harbaugh that frankly, he would be granted injunctive relief and he would be able to coach in the game on Saturday. However, as many from Michigan's side pointed out, the Big Ten very strategically, it appears, waited until, not just Friday, but Friday afternoon, and Friday afternoon when Michigan was on a plane, and Friday afternoon when Michigan was on a plane on a federally observed holiday, Veterans Day, where courts were not open. However, Michigan saw this play coming ahead of time. They do, and there are people on standby for these sorts of things. Courts are never 100% closed. However, there's a lot of legal documents to go through, and then there was supposedly a little back and forth about the judge and any possible conflict of interest, right? And so it was just a wild 24 hours to get to Michigan not having Jim Harbaugh. And the reason I bring that all up, Reiner, is because Ward Manuel had a lot to say about it before the game. And this is really where things take off, I think.
Yeah, it was a very inflammatory statement from Ward Manuel that kind of captured the feelings that seemed to be coming out of Michigan. They seemed to be very outraged by Petitti's action. And then Ward said yesterday, under the guise of the NCAA rule regarding the head coach responsibility, the Big Ten decided to penalize Harbaugh without knowing all the facts. And I find that completely unethical, insulting to a well-established process with the NCAA, and assault on the rights of everyone to be judged by a fair and complete investigation. Then he went later on and said all of the head coaches in the Big Ten, parentheses, some who have been accused of actively participating in the trading of signals of opponents, end parentheses, and my Big Ten AD colleagues can rejoice today that someone was, quote unquote, held accountable. But they should be worried about the new standard of a judgment without complete investigation that has been unleashed in this conference. I mean, that was a pretty inflammatory response by Ward Manuel, who generally doesn't say much of anything.
Stays out.
Yeah. I mean, according to some people who are kind of in the know, a lot of people were really surprised that he sent that out there. And it seemed like something that's going to end up reverberating for quite some time. And, there's a lot of saber rattling going on between Michigan and the Big Ten right now. And it sets up for a strange time period because, again, Michigan's had a very prosperous relationship with the conference. And I don't think Petitti, if you really asked him, would want to sanction one of its, top members in the conference. I mean, this is not something that I don't think he took lightly, but, from my understanding, it's he seemed pretty set that this was a extreme violation by Michigan. And so the two seem very, very opposed at this time. And that, there's a lot of animus between the two sides that has built up over the last week or two.
And now there are many layers to what's happening, right? So I think on one hand, there have been questions about Ward Manuel's relationship and Jim Harbaugh. I think this was a strong statement from Ward backing his head coach. And Jim Harbaugh has said in recent months and weeks, when asked about this contract that has been off and on and off and on, that he wants to be somewhere where he's wanted. And so I don't think that's nothing. But now the question is, I mean, it is Michigan. It is becoming Michigan against the Big Ten. And while Michigan is a big brand, and like you said, the Big Ten does not want to go against one of its top members, both academically and athletically, this conference is expanding. It is getting a national footprint. USC is coming in, Oregon is coming in, Washington is coming in, UCLA is coming in. Not that anyone really has the Michigan, that brand, but you are not. I think the Big Ten's message to Michigan is you are not the only. It's not that you're not irreplaceable, but you're not the only fish in town. You are not the only team and the only people who we have to keep in mind here. We have 13 other league members who are pissed off just like you are. And I think that was how Petitti acted. Obviously, in Ward's letter that you just read part of. The issue is the precedent it's setting, not letting due process play out. That is sort of the line that has been played out from Michigan's side. But yet again, nobody has yet denied the allegations that are being put forth against Michigan, right? And that is why, and which we got into in a video we recorded a couple of days ago. That is why the Big Ten said we kind of feel the need to act right now. The Big Ten said it too, right? Like, you didn't deny cheating. We have determined what you did already.
Right, and again, this is something that could really affect their relationship. In the long term, damage it irreparably. I mean, they talked about irreparable harm that could be caused by the players with the suspension, but I think the relationship could be, beyond repair, maybe too, given the fact that it's been so. They seem to be so opposed to and completely on opposite sides of this thing, where there's no understanding of each other's between the Big Ten and Michigan, and it's really potentially bad for Michigan in the long term. I mean, again, Big Ten has authority over Michigan. Michigan doesn't have authority over the Big Ten, so the Big Ten can make Michigan's life miserable, with scheduling, whatever. Any decision that they might have a 50-50, or they want to just kind of maybe give some grace to Michigan, well, they might not now. And so it's, this is a be careful what you wish for kind of situation for Michigan, and going forward with how they fight this battle, because they may end up losing the war in the long run.
And that is the big calculus, right? And it is a huge one. The risk reward, the cost benefit analysis of now versus later, right? Michigan sees a national championship in its reach, right? Within its grasp, a realistic shot at one. And so they are doing everything they can to make sure that their team and their players have that shot at that. And I think it is the rest will be dealt with when the rest is dealt with, as far as Michigan's concerned. And in these statements, they've said, look, we do want the investigation to happen and play out and find out what did happen. But Michigan wants to, in the meantime, be allowed to play its football games, which is why some people are like, I don't know if that's the case, and why, as we've said on this podcast and in other avenues, there's maybe not necessarily a right answer, and why Petiti and Michigan are off to a very rocky relationship in their first 7 months with one another.
Yeah, and that's it is cause for concern, I think, from Michigan's standpoint, because it's not just football; it's other sports too, and there's also politicking within the conference. I mean, ADs talk to each other, and so that maybe they're trying to rally support on one issue, and so to have Michigan, maybe to potentially freeze Michigan out or not, or basically go against them or on certain issues. I mean, you can potentially see that happening, because again, it seems like it's Michigan versus everybody within the conference, and that's not good. I mean, you don't want to be out on an island in a confederation, which is what the Big Ten is.
Right. Well, also Michigan was upset about or Michigan leadership was upset about the nature of the leaks, right? Of before, I believe it was Ross Dallinger of Yahoo Sports who was notified first before the Big Ten sent out its release that Jim Harbaugh would not be or was going to be suspended. I think University of Michigan Board of Regent Jordan Acker took to Twitter to X, whatever we want to call it, to say as much, right? Saying there's a proper way to relate, to channel things and to message things, and that was not it. And so, very publicly, Michigan. Michigan's been leaking stuff to the media as well. I mean, it's like it's gone back and forth. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, that's it's a ridiculous statement to make in a lot of ways, because both sides are guilty of that. Everything is media leaks. And this is not just this situation. Look at every sports league in America.
Well, and it's posturing on both sides, but mostly from Michigan's standpoint, where they really have been posturing, again, saber rattling and mounting a public, relations campaign within, and that's been somewhat effective, I guess. I don't know if it's swayed public opinion on how, in general, outside of their own fan base, but they are appealing to their base, and the base seems to want retribution against the Big Ten. Their own players within the university community seem to want that. I don't know how much anybody else outside Ann Arbor and outside the Michigan program and their alumni base want that, because I think even within the alumni base, there's some skepticism about their approach and what it could end up costing Michigan in the long run.
Well, there certainly is. At least that's been my sense of it as well. But where that hesitation or that trepidation comes in is sort of the crossing. It's the academic side of those who wear the Block M. I was on a radio show, a local radio show on Detroit airwaves earlier this week, and was sort of painting this picture. I was asked, how big a deal is this sign stealing really? And it's sort of, I was like, well, what colors do you wear, right? Like, as you said, everyone in maize and blue has sort of bought the message of, look, we're like, nothing to see here. Everyone's doing it. Keep on going forward. Where everyone else, especially in East Lansing and Columbus, are saying to burn the program down and Jim Harbaugh's a cheater and everything under the sun. And I was like, as always, it's probably somewhere in the middle. And where that middle is what one caller came in and said is, she's like, what about the alums who are embarrassed? And so that is, it's not just one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, again, you have a diverse community with diverse opinions. I mean, again, smart people on, that hold views on different views on many different topics, including this one. And so you're going to have not 100% on one side or the other, but it's something where, Michigan has to really consider the long-term effect of what they're doing in the moment. And right now, I just don't see the overall benefit to going this hard against the Big Ten when they have authority over you again, and Michigan does not have authority over the Big Ten.
The tail does not wag the dog. It is the other way around. And although Michigan is trying to make it the opposite. And this comes on the heels of like this $7 billion TV contract, right? So anybody who's saying that Michigan is a big brand and can go independent and like, look, USC just left the Pac-12, right? What's to stop Michigan from leaving the Big Ten? All right, where are they going to go? The SEC is the only other power conference. Michigan's not going to the SEC. I can promise you that, right? And so it's just like there's not a lot.
Well,
Michigan, what you think you have.
And Michigan built up a lot of clout and, before this whole thing, a lot of goodwill within the Big Ten. Again, they were the leading,
as the preeminent Big Ten brand.
Yeah, exactly. As far as academic and athletics, the combination of the two, they were the preeminent school in that sense. Maybe Ohio State has a little bit more on the athletic side, and maybe Northwestern on the academics. But I mean, as far as both are concerned, and as far as the brand itself, I mean, Michigan was the biggest brand, and so to potentially damage that, to fight this kind of fight when maybe Petiti felt like the evidence was so overwhelming, or as he presented in his letter, seems a little bit foolhardy going forward. I mean, we'll see if it ends up having a benefit, but even the benefit isn't guaranteed. I mean, the national championship is not something that you can bank on necessarily just by doing this. And so but yet they may be caught in a really compromised position going forward with its relationship with the conference.
Right. So they might have put all their chips on the table, and then you're saying you lose to Ohio State, and then what, right? Like you didn't even make it far enough. However, I think Michigan is doing what it had to do.
Right.
I think Michigan is doing what every school, frankly, would do in its position. And maybe Michigan is. I wouldn't even say Ohio State is the number one athletic program or institution in the Big Ten. I would say it's Michigan. I mean, 14 Big Ten championships, a league record last year. There were 12 or 13 the year before. They have won 2 football championships in a row. They have gone to multiple national championships in basketball in the last decade, a national championship in baseball. Multiple college football playoff appearances in a row. I mean, Michigan. Yeah. I mean, 14 Big Ten championships, a Big Ten record. It is the deepest athletic program. It is, the nursing, the school of business. Michigan fans and supporters can get carried away with it. It's why they have widely a bad rep. But Michigan does have a lot of elite aspects of it, and there's just no denying that.
Absolutely. No, it's one of the leading, most well-respected public universities in the world.
But they're not better or bigger than the Big Ten.
Right. This is part of the deal when you sign up to be in the conference. You have to kind of play by the rules and follow the line. This is they agreed to this rule, and then they agreed to have the sportsmanship policy that's being used against them in some ways in this situation. But it's part of the deal of being in the conference, and so again, sometimes. You just have to take your medicine. And in this situation, they don't seem to be wanting to do that. And they've really launched a very strong campaign against their own conference. And it's, again, I don't know what the long-term impact is going to be, but it doesn't look like it might be good.
No, and those first few dominoes will start falling this week when Michigan football finds out if Jim Harbaugh will coach again or at Maryland on Saturday as the team goes for its 1,000th program victory, or if Sharon Moore will be the acting head coach for his third time. Jim Harbaugh has missed 4 of the first 10 games this season, 2 different suspensions, unlike anything we have seen before. But it's just going to keep going. I think that is a great place to leave it for now. We will talk to Jim Harbaugh on Monday. We will talk to players on Tuesday. Michigan basketball also has a game on Tuesday. And we're recording this at 10:13 a.m. on Sunday. It will come out after that. I believe Michigan basketball will have some good news on the recruiting trail in between then as well. So a lot going on around the Michigan athletic programs. And we're here to keep you abreast every step of the way. But for now, we need to go because, Reiner, our flight leaves in just a couple of hours, so I'm on my way to pick you up, sir. For Reiner, for Andrew, thanks to both of you guys. Thanks to our bosses as well, Editor-in-Chief Nicole Avery-Nichols, Executive Editor Anjanette Delgado, Sports Editor Kirkland Crawford, and our audio engineer Robin Chan. Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.